Frank Serpico is probably one of the most famous police officers in U.S. or world history. Of course, he's had big movies made about him with Al Pacino playing the part of Frank Serpico. And he joined us last year for a visit, and we've got him for about 45 minutes or so today. The last few minutes, we're going to have an update on the secret wiretaps of Eric Holder being revealed. That story at the Hill crashed. We were able to find a blog copy of it and posted it up at Infowars.com if you want to read that. This is really coming to a head very, very quickly with talk of the House going to the grand jury in the District of Columbia and calling for criminal charges. This is getting very Nixonian. And we'll talk about general corruption. You know, I wanted to get Frank Serpico on about police corruption, what he witnessed in general society, because last time we talked mainly about his story. But there's so much happening. I just want to get his view overall on the state of the world today. He doesn't really need any introduction, but he joined the Newark Police Department in '59, a police officer for 12 years. His attempts to report police corruption to his superiors and the department fell on deaf ears until he was shot, but basically over to boil it all down. And then he moved to Switzerland for a while, and I could say a lot more about him, but best-selling books have been written about him, big blockbuster Hollywood films. But he's a pretty humble guy. Frank, good to have you back on with us today. I appreciate you joining us.
Hey, Alex, it's a pleasure. And the first thing I want to do is apologize for the last show when my phone went bust, and I found myself screaming into the wall phone there. So how's the transmission today?
It is good, sir. The transmission is super duper, and it's good to have you. Frank, I want to ask you out of the gates, instead of asking questions, what is front and center on your radar screen right now? We haven't talked before this interview. What is front and center in your mind right now?
Well, first of all, when you started the show, you mentioned the name Orwell?
Yes, sir.
Did you mean George Orwell, the guy who wrote 1984?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we know where we're at, you know. And foremost on my mind is that you can't trust the government, you can't trust the media, and you can't trust the medical profession. And I want to say, I mean, there are always exceptions to the rule, but you know, what happens is you have these pundits, they get their degrees and they write their books, and they change history. They're revisionists. So you got to be careful, you know, what you're reading and who wrote it and what their intention is. So we were talking about Fast and Furious, and I was wondering how many of your listeners remember the Iran-Contra affair with Ollie North and Israel, you know, delivering guns to Iran, and then also Israel sinking an American, the USS Liberty, and then all kinds of cover-ups were written. They didn't know it was an American ship, but I heard one of the men on board saying he could see the pilots as they flew by. And the amazing thing is what this government allows others to get away with when they slaughter Americans and they claim to have our best interest at heart. So what I'm saying is, no, you can't trust the government. If they told me the sun was shining, I'd bring my umbrella out.
You know, you make the parallel to Iran-Contra, that's guns out of the country, drugs into the country. Now even the Washington Post is having a report on the fact that Fast and Furious has connections to narcotics. It came out in federal court. They were authorizing cartels to bring drugs in, that the feds are arming street gangs in the U.S. I mean, literally, Fast and Furious is the tip of the iceberg. From your decades of studying this and living it, and I mean, your words last time, you said almost all the detectives around you were on the take or corrupt. I said, what was the percentage? You said basically all but I. What would you call this system?
Correction there. You said tip of the iceberg. I want to make that the tip of the dung heap. But like I say, I hear sometimes cops, they say to me, oh, you're it's just like if you speak up, they say you're anti-American. I say, no, I'm just anti-corruption. I'm not anti-police, I'm anti-corruption. Just last week, a New York City police detective gave me his shield, his detective shield, and his patrolman shield that was awarded to him by his narcotics squad when he retired. And I don't know how many of your listeners know about the Palladium murder. And the gentleman that I'm speaking of, and others that I will speak of, I say they are truly worthy of the title of New York's finest and the world's best detectives. But it seems they are at a minimum, or if they're not, their buddies are afraid to speak up because they will be made examples of. And in this case, the detective I'm speaking of, and your listeners can go online, his name is Bobby Adelarato. And he found that two men were charged with murder. They weren't even at the scene, and they served 10 years and then 2 years more in a penitentiary. And he fought not to keep them in there, but to get them out of there. And that's what he did. So there are good police out there. But the problem is that at the top, like with Bobby's case, he becomes the victim. And in cases that are going on in New York City today, that cops that are exposing these illegal search and seizures, where last year alone 700,000 stops and frisks were performed by the New York City Police Department. And one of the men who's been suspended and because he refused to give people summonses for not committing any crime. And in one case, the lieutenant said to him, "Give that guy a ticket." And he said, "What for?" He said, "An unlicensed dog." The guy said he doesn't even have a dog. But, who's going to contest it when a cop gives you a ticket? What are you going to do, bring your dog to court? And, so the system is broken, and the men that want to speak out, they become the victims. And there's others, I don't want to talk too much about them because, only the worst will happen to them.
Well, that was my next question. That was my next question. A legendary Frank Serpico, a police officer, whistleblower hero, shot and almost killed for telling the truth, exposing government drug dealing. That was my next question, and it seems like you're getting there before I even ask it. Compared to the incredible corruption you saw in the New York Police Department, now with your sources, people that obviously come to you, is it worse today, or how is the corruption different?
Well, this is what I'm told by men in the street. The corruption is different, is that cops don't want to be cops and bosses don't want to be bosses. Nobody wants to take any chances. Nobody wants to stick their neck out. They just want to collect their paycheck and go home. True, in my day, they had what they called a pad. That was actually a pad with a list of all the numbers, runners, and the banks and the dealers, who paid off. And if you didn't pay off, you'd get arrested, and sometimes worse, and intimidated. And if they found that you didn't have all your employees listed, I'm talking about the underworld, you would get fined. They ran it like a business. Now, there are a lot of police that say, "Oh, come on, a cop would never do that. Drugs, that's horrible." But what happened, to show you how the line is so thin, I started out in plain clothes. That was vice and gambling. And you would get an envelope every month without doing anything. In fact, for doing nothing, and for not arresting the people that were violating the law. So the rule in the police department at the time was you had to serve 4 years in plain clothes, And then they said, if you keep your nose clean, you will be automatically made a detective. So here's what happens. And they had this expression, the grass eaters and the meat eaters. And the grass eaters were the ones that just grazed. You know, like they might take traffic money or gambling money or prostitution money, and they'd say, well, that's just vices that people want anyway, but never touch that dirty drug money. So here's what happened. After 4 years of grazing on a salary that a police officer isn't accustomed to, and these guys would hire yachts on the weekend. They would come to work, as in the case of a Dowd and the Dirty 30. They would sell guns, shields, narcotics. One guy sniffed cocaine off his cruiser, off his police car, and he would never have been caught if it wasn't for a sting operation by another agency in another county where he left the city limits to go and squeeze some more drug dealers. So this isn't something that was caught by the NYPD themselves. And what I'm saying is, after you get used to that lifestyle, for 4 years, all of a sudden, you're in narcotics. Now, you think all of a sudden you're going to change your lifestyle? So now you become the meat eater, and the meat eaters are bloodthirsty, carnivorous, and they'll do anything for a buck.
And now our government is converting from being good old boy boss hog, or what I would term a boss hog is what you call a grass eater, to now just savage, out of control, eyes bugging out. Listen, I've been to New York quite a few times, and I've seen people ask for directions who aren't from New York and be screamed at. And just the example of, a corruption accelerating. And I've seen videos of our reporters. In one case, Luke Radowski was protesting out front Building 7, talking about Larry Silverstein's involvement in 9/11. And the security guards come out looking like guys out of Goodfellas, smoking pipes. The classic thug with a pipe thinking he's a gentleman, and going with a cartoon gangster accent, going, you know what's going to happen? We're going to call the police and say your camera's a bomb. You're going to get charged with terrorism. And I know you're not a terrorist, but you're going to get 30 days in the hole. The cops show up, the gangsters, literally out of central casting. I mean, if I was a Hollywood director, I would hire them for Sopranos. Then commands 20 police or so who grab him and take his camera and say it's a gun and a bomb. I mean, listen, I have this on tape. They didn't even bother to erase the tape. They frame him on tape and don't even care and don't even erase the tape. That, to me, showed such incredible hubris that they, and now I see footage that our correspondent shoot in New York, where the police walk around with cigarettes and cigars, arresting ABC News reporters. There's footage of that online, with their hats on sideways. I mean, now it's becoming comical. And now I'm seeing in other parts of the country. Take Seattle, where I saw articles even in their local paper where the police in some areas own half the bars because they will sell themselves drugs in the bathroom and then take the people's bars. So now they're not even shaking down criminals, which is the old excuse, as you know, for grazers or whatever. So they're becoming survival of the fittest. The bigger the meat eater, the more power they get. And so now what a meat eater would have been 20 years ago is now a grazer. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. There was one precinct commander. He even complained to this guy and said, if it wasn't for that effing Serpico, I would have been a millionaire today. So it shows you the amount of money that's floating out there. And in the New York Times op-ed Monday, June 18th of this year, is an article there called Policing by the Numbers. And it's written by a John Eterno, who is a retired New York City police captain. He's a professor of criminal justice and all that stuff. But he says, an officer assigned to an impact zone a high-crime area, told me that the Constitution, this quote, the Constitution has been thrown out the window when it comes to stops. He is given strict daily quotas and asked at the end of his tour about his numbers. An officer who fails to meet the required number for the day is berated, sometimes in front of peers, not allowed time off, and given unpalatable work assignments. Nothing is asked about maintaining order, interacting with the community, or other kinds of police works. The result of this performance culture, needless summonses for minor violations, putting one's feet on the subway seats, playing chess in a park, failing to wear seatbelts, and other quota-driven activity, this does not make for efficient policing, etc. So that's where it is today. Another police officer said to me, our cop today is nothing more than an armed tax collector. I mean, these people who have legitimate permits, these vendors on the street trying to make a living, they're given fines at times up to $1,000. How are they ever going to pay these fines? And the crazy thing is, if you go out of the city and you can make a turn, you can make a right turn on a red light when it's safe. In the city, you try that, and the ticket is like $100. They tow your cars away. It's just...
Now, listen, I talked to people that I've known for like 16 years. He owned a couple dump trucks, made a decent living. Now he's just out of business because of the fines and fees. They'll even pull a new truck over and say there's dirt on the bumper here in Austin, and the cops just don't care. People are going bankrupt. Only big companies can come in and then pass on the expenses to people that hire them. It's destroying the economy, and the government loves it. They love it. It's just, I mean, they're going to kill this country.
Yeah. This guy goes on to say, policing in a democracy is not easy, nor is it meant to be. Reducing crime numbers is simple if you disregard basic rights, ignore victims, mandate quotas, and manipulate numbers. The lunacy of this policy performance culture can end only with stranger leadership, greater transparency, stronger leadership, that is, which would be strange, greater transparency and more meaningful relationships with communities. And then it says it is worth heeding what Detective Frank Serpico testified on police corruption told the Knapp Commission in 1971. Quote, the department must realize that an effective continuing relationship between the police and the public is more important than an impressive arrest record. And that's what I became a cop for. You know,
Frank, where is it all going? Where is it all going? Because you're in one jurisdiction and the police are changing flat tires, helping people, actually going after bad guys, but that's more and more rare. And you go in another jurisdiction, I don't care if it's in the South, the North, the West, and the police are crazed, wild-eyed thugs who instinctively, I can just by their bearing, automatically tell her the enemy of society. I mean, where is this going from your research and your experience if the corruption continues to grow this fast?
Well, it's not going good if it's not stopped, because this kind of activity doesn't happen if it's not condoned at the top. For example, the commissioner in New York in charge of press relations, he commented about me. He says my comments are born out of ignorance from being away for 40 years. And my response to him is, well, what's his excuse? Doesn't he watch and see, all these videos that are being taken by independent people of harassment and... well,
that's my question. How could police walk up on a video and say, we're going to say your camera is a gun and a bomb, and frame someone on tape and not even care to erase the tape? I mean, where this confidence says they're going to get promoted for stomping on somebody's rights and setting them up.
Well, I don't know if you know the case of Adrian Schoolcraft, a police officer who refused to go along, and they broke into his house at night, handcuffed him behind his back, and took him to the psycho ward where he was handcuffed to a gurney for 6 days. And then you read the police blog, and nobody wants to believe it because you can't just psycho a guy with, but if it's the mayor and the police commissioner who's behind it, then, who's going to say no? And so it's really terrible. And what amazes me is that the people aren't up in arms as they did in Egypt. You think the people would have had enough and say no more, but somehow I'm sure you're familiar with young Marcus Tullius Cicero, who back in, it was 70 years before the birth of Christ, and the Roman Republic, the foremost power of its day, had reached its zenith, and its leadership had attained unbound wealth and unstinted power. The rulers were intolerant of restraint, indifferent to demands.
I tell you what, Frank Serpico, stay there. Got to go to break. Come back with a quote. Frank, repeat what you were saying off air. On all those issues, you were saying, well, your show says it all. War on for your mind. What's going on here?
Well, the human race has been pawned to the highest bidder. It amazes me that these young kids kowtow, to all these, the Pope, the Queen, the media, the government. The Queen, who is one of the, whatever she is, she's certainly not a princess. The queen bee with the bees works more than the rest of the workers. These people who have exploited the world and races, that people should curtsy to them. It is mind-boggling. It's insane that they think that they're better than the rest of the human race. You know what I'm talking about, where, if you're with the prince or you're with them, you have to curtsy. My God, when are the people going to wake up? They're being held prisoners in their own minds.
You're absolutely right.
And then, I get a letter from the NAACP, which I'm a member, and, I believe in equality and justice, but they say, Frank, taking a stand for what is right sometimes comes with grave consequences. Yes, that's true. And then they go, since taking office as United Attorney General, what? They're saying, sadly, extreme elements within the U.S. House are threatening the attorney. But, what's happening, there are no principles. It should be principles above personality. And it's all this cronyism, and I wish these young kids today, they would wake up and, you remember what happened at Kent State when the National Guard opened fire on its own citizens. Maybe that's what they're afraid of, but...
well, let me raise that, because it's funny you brought that up. They're announcing more and more military on the streets. Secretary of the Army wants to station a brigade in every city. It's not for Al-Qaeda now. They're little buddies they're using over in Libya and Syria. It's for us. They're announcing armed drones. They're announcing 450 million rounds of 40 cal hollow point for citizens. Homeland Security is getting mobile armored pillboxes. What do you think this whole buildup is for, Serpico?
Well, if it's the way it's happening, it's not for the good. It's to suppress the masses. We got another Syria. It's going to be the U.S. is, they say the United States, but the people have to get united against oppression is what they have to do, and this is what the government is afraid of. So they're going to, control the people by force of arms. And, I live in a country. What they say, I can skin a buck, I could run a trout line, and a country boy can survive, And the people are arming up. They don't trust the government, so, it's not just a few. It's those that are awake, and are they going to say that I'm talking, accuse me of try and incite the masses. You don't know what this government is capable of. And let me tell you, you know, you were saying I was in Switzerland. You know why I left Switzerland? Because I was run out by the FBI because they wanted me to come back to New York and be a part of their sham, and I refused, and they sent out a subpoena and said I would be held in contempt if I refused, and so I had to take it on the lam out of Switzerland. But again, you have one country, you have another country. I ended up in Holland, and I ended up pulling a little kid out of the canal that had fallen into the canal, and a crowd, assembled, and then the police, and I snuck out through the crowd before the police got there. And then a couple of nights later, there was a burglary in progress across the canal because I was living on the canal and I had my dog with me and he was barking. And I looked and call it muscle memory or reflex. I called the police and then I went out there and they had the guy and with all the booty, he took off the boat, and I was really impressed by the way that he was handled by the police. And the next morning, 2 detectives came to my door and escorted me to police headquarters. And they brought me through the cells, and I thought, oh, they're going to throw me in the flammer. But at least I thought, look at this. You can eat off the floor here, stainless steel, and it was civil, not like the dungeons they have in New York and other places. And then they didn't throw me in there. They brought me upstairs to the police commissioner, and the commissioner, a gray-haired gentleman, he jumped to his feet. He reached out his hand and he said, Meneer, sir, may I shake your hand? And I thought, what? Am I dreaming or something? He had a copy of his book on my desk, on his desk. And I said, it's always a pleasure to shake the hand of a police officer that wants to shake my hand. And that's what I wrote in his book. And a couple of years ago when I was involved with the drug wars, the damage done, the drug wars, and it was premiering in Amsterdam, the police commissioner, the new police commissioner, came to introduce me, and he said, in 1974, I had to choose between becoming an F-16 pilot or the sports academy. And he says, and then I saw a movie called Serpico, and my mind was made up. So my point is, what we have to do, we have to inspire people, because by our deeds, they're like pebbles that you throw into a body of water, they make ripples. And I never would have imagined that, 30, 40 years after, people are still being inspired, and that's what the people need. They need inspiration, well, like your show that, tells people what's really going on in the world. And, I know they play with words. They got their own vocabulary. They say freedom isn't free. You bet your ass it isn't free. You have to fight for it, but not in foreign countries. Right here in our own country, that's where you have to fight for your freedom.
Wow, Frank Serpico, this is an amazing interview. You are definitely on fire today. We're going to do overdrive, folks. We can finish the hour with him. We're just going to go into the 4th hour with Wayne Madsen coming up, if he's able to do that. He's got the inside scoop on Fast and Furious murders, all of it. Former NSA officer and congressional reporter. Everything he told me 3 or 4 months ago, was actually about a year ago, but 3 or 4 months ago really got clear with informants and people. He had to leave the country for a while over all this. He's going to be joining us dealing with it because reportedly the White House had a hitman out after him, but once that went public, they left him alone. That's another issue. But talking about freedom not being free, they killed the D.C. madam after she was on my show, and they just throw these lies at everybody. And when everybody starts just trying to go along to get along, that's what allows corruption to run rampant. But what Frank was talking about, all the good police he's inspired, and others, and that's what you've got to do. All of us doing little things like the pebbles in a pond, but you can feel the evil intensifying right now. You can see the insane corruption. Frank, let me raise a curveball on you here. because, you know, we didn't talk before you came on today. What about 9/11? It's been used as the foundation of everything that we see happening. The warrantless spying that's illegal, the highway checkpoints all over the country, the TSA sticking their hands down our pants. And I want to ask you about that. William Shatner now being groped by him today, leaving LAX. I mean, oh, here's William Shatner. Let's pull his pants down, you know. I mean, he may be a terrorist. This training us all that we're prisoners while ignoring the real criminals that are all around us. But the official story of 9/11, now Anwar al-Awlaki, number 3 in al-Qaeda, they admit was really CIA. The head of the 7/7 bombings, they admit was MI6. Now they publicly use al-Qaeda to take over Libya and now Syria, and they admit this in the news. Well, yeah, al-Qaeda is working for us, but they're good guys. But I've got to have TSA grope my family, and William Shatner's got to have him pull his pants down because they're going in his pants. I mean, that's what they did. They went in his pants, they fell off. It happens all the time to people. Make old ladies get out of wheelchairs. I mean, I'm ranting here, Serpico, but this foundation of 9/11, what's your view on that?
First of all, you know, I refused to fly because when I came back in the country, I was strip searched by the customs people, and they knew everything that was going on in my life with the police, which was supposed to be secret. So, but I have to say one thing, that the thing is, it's the hierarchy that forces these men to do it, like their quotas. And these guys, as they said to me, you know, Frank, I mean, it might be rationalizing, but they say, you know, we got our jobs, our home, we have to pay the mortgage. So they are the victims, but they just have to be strong enough. But how are you going to do it when they hold the axe over you? I wrote an article about 9/11 for Chronogram magazine way back when. I don't remember all the names and stuff now, but about the Iron Triangle, and that the night before 9/11, you know, bin Laden's, I think it was his brother, and all these heads of state had this meeting at, I forget which hotel it was here in America.
It was the Ritz-Carlton.
Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, no, that was in the London Guardian.
You know about that, right?
Yeah, no, Bush and all the bin Ladens, and then only they were allowed to leave the country on the day of 9/11 when all the air traffic was shut down. That's confirmed, yes.
Yeah, so wasn't that a coincidence?
Yeah. No, I mean, they blew it sky high. Yeah, it's a fact.
And then this other character, Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani, there still is hope for democracy in America. I got to say that, because there's this street artist, and his name is no relation to the show host. It's not, I think it's Dave, something, Robert Letterman or something, but anyway, he was a street artist, and he would make paintings of Giuliani, and he would call him Adolf Giuliani with a mustache, and things like that. Giuliani, the mayor of New York, had him arrested 41 times, and this street artist managed to beat him every time. So there are some good judges out there, and they have to inspire the others. We have to, there was a quote I was looking for here from Cicero, about diligence.
You're talking about the height of the Roman Empire. You were building it up, and we had to go to break.
Right. But there's I lost the quote, but in the end he says, "And who shall say we are worthy of more?" So you can't blame nobody if you sit on your laurels and you don't do anything about it. So the people, their strength in numbers. He says, though liberty is established by law, we must be vigilant, for liberty to enslave us is always present under that very liberty. Our Constitution speaks of the general welfare of the people. Under that phrase, all sorts of excesses can be employed by lusting tyrants to make us bondsmen. So that doesn't say it all. I don't know what does, anyway.
And of course, Cicero really helped promote the idea.
I don't know how much time we have, but it's always a pleasure talking to you and visiting your website about our great Pope and all the work he did. And, you know, that's the opiate of the masses. You know, as I said before, you know, the Pope, the Queen, you know, these rock stars, the labels inside your clothes, you know, it's the corporations that make pawns out of the public. And, you know, telling you, then you see these guys, these television guys are on public television and with a brand new suit every time, and the commissioner too in New York City, $1,000 suits, $100 ties. You know, they're setting a good example for you know, tightening your belt.
What do you think about Eric Holder? From my research, he was intimately involved in Oklahoma City and in the cover-up, and it's in federal court. It was even in the Chicago Tribune and El Paso Times that the drug cartels, Sinaloa got caught with 5 tons. They're in court, and the feds come in and go, yeah, it's national security. We authorize them to bring the drugs in. And then it happened with a bunch of other cartels. And then we found out that they're giving guns to gangs all over the U.S., but also overseas. I mean, it's just, they are nothing but total gangsters.
You're talking about the government is exactly. The thing is, we never would even probably heard about what happened in Mexico if it wasn't for the killing of the federal agent. You know, they say nothing of the 200 other Mexicans that were slaughtered. So, you know, body count doesn't mean anything to people that are running the show. You know, it's collateral damage. And so that's why, you know, the NAACP says here in their letter, however, it says the NAC supports accountability and transparency at every level. Fine. But they say, however, this crusade in Congress reeks of partisan politics. Well, I want to say, what does this letter reek of, you know? And so everybody's using words, this cronyism, and I say let the chips fall where they may, and what we find, as I said before, is just the tip of the dung heap.
No, you're right. Justice be done, may the heavens fall. I found a Cicero quote from B.C. here. It says, when a government becomes powerful, period, it is a usurper which takes bread from the innocent mouths and deprives honorable men of their substance for votes with which to perpetuate itself. And because the Romans did the same thing with citizens, they would go buy votes, they would take it with welfare taxes and then go to the welfare citizens on the dole and use them to outvote other people that produced. I mean, this stuff's been going on forever.
Yeah, well, now with the internet and stuff, maybe people can, you know, inform each other better. You know, the other day I went on and I saw something about Kissinger, and I don't know if it was real or not, but I wanted to say something about, you know, Kissinger, one of the biggest war criminals that ever was.
Tell you what, we're going to break. Final segment. Frank Serpico, our guest, then Wayne Madsen is coming up with breaking news on Fast and Furious and so much more. Frank, stay there. Final segment. You're a real... Got about 4 or 5 minutes left with Frank Serpico. What a legend. Like I said, we've got to inspire other people. And he gave the examples of how he inspired people and never knew he was doing it. I know he certainly inspired me. I was growing up as a child. I'm only 38. I don't know, I was probably like 12 years old or something. And my dad, you know, went and rented Serpico and popped it in the VCR. Or it was on, I don't know, HBO or something. I don't remember. I don't think we had cable when I was 12. The point is, I remember being a little kid with my dad watching it. My dad going, this is a true story. And then I started noticing a few years later that the police were dealing drugs where I lived, outside Dallas, and then still pulling people over and harassing them. And I'd be like, You deal drugs. What are you doing asking if I have drugs? I don't use drugs. I'll kill you, kid. You're going to jail. You know, drag me out of the car where I was riding to school with older kids and take me to jail. And they told my dad through our lawyer, because he got contacted, and they said, we're going to kill your son if he doesn't shut up. But then later, the sheriff got busted shipping cocaine in by the FBI, who are a bunch of drug dealers, too, at the top. Frank, briefly, you wanted to make some comments. I forget about what we were talking during the break. What was
about Kissinger?
Oh, yeah, Kissinger. Go ahead.
I mean, it's just a classic example how these, terrible people are held up by our government as good people, as examples. And the other day, I don't know how old it was on the Internet, some journalist claimed he saw Kissinger being groped, and...
No. Kissinger admitted it. That happened at the airport, yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I was saying, well, they had a right to, maybe he did have a weapon of mass destruction on him, because he is a terrorist. But anyway, when I went to see the blog, I was pleased to see all the comments that the people were making back and forth. The people know that he was a war criminal, and one said, winning the Nobel Prize is not hard when you are one of the founding members of the Bilderberg Zion Club, and, comments like that. So people are aware, they're not asleep. And I'm saying this is all due to the Internet, where people can, reach millions of people around the world. And anyway, in the words of James Madison, he said, no nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. And that's what we're in now, continual warfare. And how much time do we have? Because I'd like to close with the words of Louis D. Brandeis, who was a secular humanist. And I think, wasn't he also on the court? Louis Brandeis?
Sure, go ahead. We got about a minute.
He says, we can have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth in the hands of a few. But we can't have both.
Well, Frank Serpico, thanks to you standing up for what's right. We now know, back when you first stood up, people were like, oh, there's no such thing as cops stealing drugs. In the 50s, they said La Cosa Nostra didn't exist. Our naivete is what has allowed us to become this enslaved and our inaction. But thank you for helping pull back some very dangerous veils. And I want you to have a great weekend, and I look forward to maybe in 6 months or so.
Okay, and thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Letting me say my piece.
And thank you for visiting our news website, Infowars.com. Let me say bye to you right here at the end of this segment, Frank. We'll put you on hold. Wow, there goes Frank Serpico. We're going into overdrive for Wayne Madsen, and then your calls straight ahead. It's Friday. I'll be back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central with the Sunday show as well. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.